right, so I'm gonna start off here. Just make sure that the mic and everything is working. All right, cool. So I can hear myself. All right. So thanks for joining and tuning in, everyone who is watching. This is the first stream. I'm thinking of doing this on a regular basis. For the time being, I haven't really settled on a time. But I'm thinking of doing this Mondays and Wednesdays at 10 a.m. just to start off, see how things go, and depending if, it conflicts with some of the individuals who are interested in this chat, if it conflicts with their time zones, I may change that accordingly. But again, for the time being, I'm gonna start off with just doing Mondays and Wednesdays at 10 a.m. and that's Eastern time. All right. So the way that I kind of want to approach this stream, or I guess the goal of it is to give it a little bit of background. My name is Luis. I work with Azure Machine Learning and with ML.NET, mainly on the documentation side, trying to create resources and assets for individuals to basically learn how to use these tools. And in that effort, I'm very fortunate in the respects that I'm able to see both sides. I'm able to see on the Azure Machine Learning side, I'm able to see how individuals use the tools with something like Python or R, which tend to be the more dominant and the more popular set of tools and languages for data analytics and machine learning workflows. On the ML.NET side, I see how you can do that with .NET and the .NET set of tooling. And if I'm being honest, I have a preference towards the .NET side of things. So I really enjoy seeing all the things that are possible in Python, right? But because that community, it's really great. They're an awesome community. They're all the projects that come out of there. Some of the state of the art implementations of cutting edge research. A lot of it you're starting to see it in Python. You also see it in R. You see it in Julia as well. But I often find myself thinking, okay, well, that's really nice and that's cool. But how can .NET developers and how can individuals who have a preference towards staying within the .NET ecosystem take advantage of some of those tools and take advantage of some of those techniques to, again, build these data analytics and machine learning workflows inside of their applications? So I'm like, okay, well, why not just set up a stream? I won't, claim to say that I know all of them and how to use all these tools. But I do want it to be a learning experience, right? I want it to be a learning experience for me. I want it to be a learning experience for you, the viewers. And I'm going to be using a lot of open source libraries and packages that, you know, at the very least, what we can do is if we ever run into issues, we can at least provide feedback for the library authors or the individuals who are building these systems. At the very least, we can do that, right? And at best, we can also try to contribute back to these packages and try to make the experience just a little bit better, whether that's documentation, whether that's actually code. We'll try to do it all. One of the things that I certainly don't want to do is, as much as possible, I want to stay away from reinventing the wheel, right? So that is a goal of mine. I certainly want to use the libraries that are out there as much as possible. So again, I can be productive. I think in traditional scenarios, and a lot of times, that's typically how it is, right? You want to be as productive as possible. You don't necessarily want to learn how to implement the k-means or k-nearest neighbors algorithm. You just want to be able to feed your data or use existing libraries to do the work for you as much as possible. And worst case scenario, you would have to sort of, basically build your own when the tooling isn't sufficient enough. But as much as possible, I want to stay away, like I said, from trying to reinvent the wheel, from trying to basically build my own thing. I want to be able to leverage and show how we can basically use these tools to achieve our purpose and to get something done and to be productive, right? Now, within the .NET ecosystem, there's a lot of languages. Well, not a lot, but you have C Sharp, F Sharp, and Visual Basic. And I would say that certainly the majority of developers may be using C Sharp, right? With F Sharp and Visual Basic, sort of a little bit. The numbers are a bit smaller in that end. But I personally think that F Sharp is an excellent language to build data analytics and to build machine learning workflows and applications with. I've dabbled probably for about the past 2 years with F Sharp, and the community it's really excellent. I think the language is great. I think what F Sharp gives you from a language standpoint is that it's very much like Python. So a lot of the things that people tend to like about Python, that it's very succinct, no curly braces, and things like that. If you were to look as a Python developer at F Sharp, you would see that there's a lot of things that are very similar and that are very familiar. They allow you to basically be productive very fast, right? You don't need to have a lot of sort of ceremony to the objects that you're building. You can basically model your data very succinctly, and as such, you're able to sort of be more productive as a result of that. Are there some is there are there sort of is there sort of a learning curve? There certainly is, right? Some things you may not necessarily be familiar. Some of the operators may seem weird, but again, that's no different than if you were learning a different language. And as a .NET developer, right, you're able to leverage some of these things while staying within the ecosystem. All right, so F Sharp provides a lot of really nice things. One of the other things I like about F Sharp, and that I like about .NET in general, is I really like the Python side of things. That it's very succinct and it's very easy to be productive. But I really love the compiler. I love having the safety of the compiler behind me. I love having types. So to me, at the very least, what types do is, let's say you walk away from your code for like 2 weeks. At the very least, you know, for a particular function, what it expects coming in and what it expects going out. And you're starting to see that with Python actually through type annotations. I don't think that it's enforced. You can't necessarily compile it, but I think you can do static analysis with Python. So you're starting to see Python sort of shift in that direction. So it makes you think, okay, well, they're shifting towards this because perhaps they may find it more convenient. Developers may find it more convenient. So if that's the case, here you have in the .NET space, you have C Sharp, you have F Sharp specifically, where again you can leverage that succinctness. You can leverage sort of the productivity that F Sharp gives you, and at the same time you have the compiler backing you the entire way. All right. So I personally, like I said, I believe that .NET is a really great place to build these production grade data analytics and machine learning workflows. And I think F Sharp is certainly a way that you can sort of boost these efforts and be even more productive. C Sharp, it's great, and there's a lot of libraries for it and things like that. But I think for these particular workflows, F Sharp really stands out. So again, this stream, what it's going to do is I'm going to basically try to do it in multiple languages, but I think the one that I'm going to focus on is on F Sharp. Again, I really want this to be a learning experience. I for one, selfishly, I want to improve my F Sharp. I want to improve my data analytics and my data science skills. I want to be able to try different technologies, perhaps some that might not necessarily work day to day with. I definitely want to share resources, and I want to learn from the viewers. So there's certainly that aspect of it, right? There's for the viewers, I definitely want it to be a learning experience. If you pick up some FSharp along the way, that's awesome. And if, most certainly if you pick up the data analytics, AI, and basically be able to then start using these tools within your applications, that's definitely a bonus. It's something that I wish, viewers take from this. And ultimately, again, like I said, I want to be able to provide feedback to the library authors for the libraries that we're using so that they can themselves be able to either improve these libraries or make these workflows just a little bit better to work with. What I don't want this to be, I don't want to convince you that .NET is superior, and I don't want to sort of say that .NET is the best. If that is the conclusion that you come to after this, great. But that's certainly not the goal. And I certainly don't want to bash, again, these other languages and tools that are out there because they're all great. At the end of the day, you got to be able to use a tool that works, that gets the job done, right? And if that doesn't happen to be .NET, then so be it, right? But as much as possible, like I said, I want to stay within the .NET ecosystem. So with that, let me kind of start out sort of outlining kind of where I wanna take this the stream, some of the stuff that I want to do. There is this. Let me see. Pull this up on screen. So there is this really neat initiative or sort of organization within Microsoft. And it's the Microsoft Reactors. And Microsoft Reactors, way you can think of them, they're basically these hubs, both physical, that's no longer the case, but prior to COVID, it certainly used to be the case that there were these hubs where startups, meetup groups, in general, the community could take advantage of these locations to basically come, meet, share, learn together, and do all those things, and connect with each other. They were pretty much spread out throughout all over the world. There's actually one here in New York that I've been to a few times, and it's really great. And in addition to basically providing startups and providing the communities, the different meetup communities, with a space for them to hold their meetings and again to connect and learn and share with each other. They put on events on a fairly regular basis. So they used to put on these events in person, so you would basically register and you'd be able to go. Again, unfortunately, no longer is the case, right? Because everything's pretty much shut down. But they are still doing these things on a fairly regular basis on Twitch. I actually follow a few, basically host them sometimes on my channel here. And I think they typically stream through the Microsoft Developer Twitch channel. Let me see if I could find it. Let's see, Twitch, show more. Let's see, Microsoft Developer. Did I get the right one? Okay, so you'll see here that the Reactor puts on events through the Microsoft Developer. I'll actually paste it into the chat for convenience. Let's see here. So you can follow them at the Microsoft Developer. That's typically where they'll host their events. I'll also paste the site onto the chat so you can take a look at that. And again, they have events pretty much going on all the time, and they're really cool. They're very interesting. If you take a look at today's events, for example, they have this one on building smart contracts with blockchain. They have intro to machine learning models, and they have these building and deploying PyTorch models with Azure machine learning. So they have a lot of really great, really interesting content, and it's all for free, right? So you can take advantage of this all for free. So I would definitely, tell you to consider checking out the Microsoft Reactors. So with that though, some of the workshops actually are available out there on GitHub. Let me paste this into the chat. Okay, so on GitHub, you could basically download some of these workshops that are out there, and you can leverage them for your purposes and just basically go through them at your own pace. So for example, if we were to take a look at this data science one workshop, you can see you can do the full day one, and you'll see here what's there is these Jupyter Notebooks, all basically following some sort of section or learning module, if you will. And this one, it's just an introduction to Python. And what Jupyter Notebooks, for those of you who may not be familiar with them, Jupyter Notebooks are these interactive computing environment. So they're actually very, very popular within the data science community. Again, if you're using Python, if you're using R, you're certainly going to see these. And the nice thing about Jupyter Notebooks is that they support over 40 different languages. So although you can certainly use it with Python and R, there's many languages that you can use with Jupyter Notebooks. And again, what they do is, as you can see here, is they provide this sort of computing environment. You're able to write code, you're able to write notes alongside your code. You're also able to see the output of this code and display this alongside the code that generated that result as well. So that's essentially what Jupyter Notebooks is. How you can take advantage of this with .NET is .NET has a kernel. It's called .NET Interactive. So let me see if I can find .NET Interactive. And I'll paste this into the chat as well. So you have .NET Interactive, and what .NET Interactive gives you is it gives you PowerShell, C#, and F# kernels. And just to be clear, a kernel, what it is, it's basically this process that runs in the background that when you execute code from Jupyter Notebooks, it passes it to the kernel. The kernel runs that piece of code in the language that's specified, and then it returns the output. So that's how Jupyter Notebooks work. They're based off of these kernels. And in the case of .NET Interactive, it's a .NET kernel and a PowerShell kernel or .NET PowerShell kernel that's running. And that's how you're able to essentially execute C#, F#, and PowerShell code and commands inside of Jupyter Notebooks. Okay. So going back to this, again, I said that I don't want to reinvent the wheel. There's all this really awesome content here. It's really exciting, and it gives us something to work off of. So what I want to do is I want to be able to go through these Reactor workshops, which are written in Python. They're built in Python, and I want to be able to see whether we can do everything, or at least most of the things, in F# or in .NET. And again, to do that, we're going to be using F#. We're going to be using .NET Interactive, in this case, or Jupyter Notebooks, specifically the .NET Interactive kernel for Jupyter Notebooks, and we'll see how that goes. I think along the way, I haven't really fully gone through these, but I have some ideas of some of the tools that we'll be using. Something else that we might be using, I believe that they use Pandas for some of these, and Pandas is this Python library that allows you to work with data frames. If you're coming from R, you may be familiar with data frames. And in Python, it's very much the same thing. It's just this way to basically represent data in a tabular format. Let's see. Yeah, so sorry. So going back, so I believe that they use Pandas for these. Now, there is no Pandas equivalent per se, or there's no Pandas library for .NET. So what we may consider using in this case might be the data frame API. And the data frame API, it's this fairly new, still very, very early API that allows you to basically work with data in a tabular format inside of Jupyter Notebooks specifically. You can use this outside of Jupyter Notebooks, but where it really shines is being able to perform transformations and be able to visually see what the result of those transformations is on your data. All right, so actually, let me go to NuGet. So the data frame API is under the Microsoft data. What's this? I think. Yeah, Microsoft Data Analysis. So at the moment, this is part of the CoreFX Lab repository on GitHub, right? And if you go to your source, Microsoft Data Analysis, this is basically contains the source code for the data frame. And if you want to use this inside of your projects, you basically just have to reference and download and reference this NuGet package called Microsoft Data Analysis, and you should be able to start using it. So I guess the question now becomes, what exactly do I want to focus on for this particular stream? If we, whoops, let's take a look at this data science one. So what will data science one cover? It's going to give us an introduction to Python, NumPy. So NumPy is this really nice library that gives you a way to interact with data and perform transformations on data, on lists of data, right? And it allows you to create sort of multidimensional arrays and be able to operate on these multidimensional arrays. There's pandas, which was something that I was talking about earlier. Getting your data ready. Okay. All right, so I think we can start with this one, with the data science one. Let's see here. What I'm going to probably do is I'm going to go ahead and have this side by side. And perhaps the other thing that I'll do is I'll have .NET Interactive running locally. Yeah, let's try that. So to run .NET Interactive, let's see. So to run .NET Interactive, there's a little bit of setup that you need to do. All right, so one of the things that you're gonna want to install, so first of all, you need to have the .NET 3.1 SDK installed. So if we go to PowerShell, I believe I do have it installed. I may even have the preview version, .NET version. Yeah, so I'm using 5.0 preview, but that should be okay. That should be enough for our purposes. You're gonna have to install Anaconda. So what Anaconda is, actually, let's go into it so you can see exactly what it is. But essentially, it's as it says here, it's a data science toolkit, and it gives you, it brings a lot of things out of the box. It has Jupyter Notebooks, it has Spider, which is a nice IDE for working in Python. It provides you with Conda, which among many things, such as being able to help you create virtual environments in Python for building your projects. It also gives you the ability to download packages, so you get sort of like a package manager as part of it as well. So it's a ton of tools that you get built in with Anaconda. And if you're working with Windows specifically or Mac, it probably might be the better way to go about it. Although Python is cross-platform, sometimes these numerical libraries and data analytics libraries can sometimes be tricky to install on their own, and Anaconda kind of streamlines that process a little bit. It just makes it that much easier. So if you're going to be working with data analytics, whether that's Python or with the .NET Interactive and .NET in general, I highly encourage you to go ahead and download Anaconda. Okay. I believe I already have this installed, so that I won't need to do that. Then what you're going to have to basically do is, as you can see in this case, we're basically looking what kernels are installed. You should only see the Python kernel installed by default when you first install Anaconda, but once you install .NET Interactive and you do kernel spec list, you should then be able to see both the C#, FSharp, and PowerShell kernels. Okay, so actually, before we even start this, let me go ahead and hey, Silicon Orchid, thanks for joining. That was by the way, Silicon Orchid, that stream that you did on spatial anchors last week, that was really cool. I definitely learned a lot. I for sure don't get a lot of this stuff yet, but it sounds like a really interesting project to basically try to tackle at some point. So let's see here. So the first thing that we might want to do is we probably want to create a repo that's going to contain all the different projects that we have. and then we're basically gonna take on for this particular stream. So I guess what I could do is I can make a directory and call it stream projects. Okay. I probably should have done it another way, but fine. Get init. And then let me go back here to GitHub. And create a repo for this. Repository, stream, I think that's what I called it. Collection of projects on Twitch stream. Okay, cool, public. Sure. I'll go with Visual Studio for this. License, sure, let's make it MIT. Anybody can use it. Forget the README for now. Actually, let's do a README. Let's create the repo. All right, so now we have a repo, and what I want to do now is I want to go ahead and link it to this, git remote add origin, git pull, git pull origin. Okay, sure. So let's see here. Is everything I want in here? Okay, cool. So now what I can do is, let me make a directory, make the Reactor Workshops. Okay, so essentially now I just basically want to be able to create a space for the Reactor Workshops. We're probably going to be tackling other things, so I just want to make a folder for the Reactor Workshop specifically. So Reactor Workshops, this contains samples converted to .NET languages. Uses the, let's see, or is it .NET Python Reactors? And I'm going to say that just to link it to make sure that we know where we're getting this from. Workshops as reference. Okay, cool. So now, let's see. Awesome. So adding README. Oh, bump up the various font sizes. I absolutely can. I think I could do that with, there we go. Is that good? So essentially what I want to do now is I want to be able to check this in. So something really cool. I'm always finding it. Like, I think that there's somebody on Twitter that I've seen that they basically post Visual Studio Code tips and tricks. And it wasn't until about last year that I learned about some of the Git functionality that you get out of the box with Visual Studio Code. And it's so cool. So as opposed to me having to do git add, git commit -m, provide my message, and then git push to wherever it is that I'm pushing to. If you're doing it from inside of Visual Studio Code, your git add would essentially be this, right? So in this case, there's only one file, so I can basically do all those. Or you can do them individually by clicking on the file itself. Your git commit -m would essentially be this, right? You provide this message. For workshops folder. So you provide some sort of detailed message, and then your git commit -m is essentially this, right? You go ahead and click this to commit, and now you've done both of those. And then to push, all you need to do is you just click this. You click this button down here that has like a little cloud and an up arrow, and you just click that. And that should be enough to get you started. Let's see. See a little bit. So you folks probably knew this, but when I learned about it, it just blew my mind. Let's see. So if we go now to our stream projects, we should have a directory with a README. There we go, Reactor Workshops. Cool. All right, so now we're ready to get started. Oh, one thing that I didn't mention before was if you want to get started with .NET Interactive. So the way that I'm going about it is I'm basically doing this locally, right? So I'm doing all my changes locally and yeah, so I'm installing all that I need to be able to run Jupyter Notebooks or .NET Jupyter Notebooks with .NET Interactive and the .NET kernel. Let's see. So if you wanted to run this out of the box, what you can do is there's this thing here. It's called Launch. It's a button that says Launch Binder, and you can click on that. And Binder, essentially, what it is, it's this service tool service that what it does is it creates a Docker image. And it installs all the, basically, it performs all the steps that you would be doing here. Oh, did I lose .NET Interactive? I lost .NET Interactive. But essentially all the steps that you would otherwise do locally on your machine. And it does them for you in the cloud, right? So now you have, you're able to run Jupyter Notebook with the .NET kernel, as you can see here, C#, FSharp, and .NET PowerShell. You can just run it in the cloud without installing anything just by doing Launch Binder. And here what you have are different examples in the respective languages of how to use Jupyter Notebooks or .NET Interactive with .NET Interactive with Jupyter Notebooks. Oh, interesting. I did not know about the visualization plugin. Would you happen to know the name of that, Silicon Orchid? Because that would be interesting to take a look at. I'm always, especially if I'm doing rebases. Oh, there we go. Thanks for sharing. Very cool. Yeah, I could have used this last week for sure. I was having a bit of Git trouble with release branches and merging stuff on a Friday, worst of all, on a Friday afternoon. So this certainly could have helped. Thanks for the heads up. I'll check it out. Oh, a few fullest of toolkit graph. Let's take a look here. We can install it, the extension. Git graph. Cool. I'm guessing this is it. Yep, looks like it. Awesome. So while that's installing, let's go back to Jupyter Lab. So Jupyter Lab is this other way to interact and basically be able to essentially. Sorry, give me 1 second. I see that my video, for whatever reason, stopped. Not that that's important to the stream, but let's see. That's weird. Let's see if we can get it back. Weird. All right, well, we'll have to do without video. Anyway, what's most important is here that we're learning. So essentially Jupyter Lab, where I was saying that Jupyter Lab is a way for you to execute your Jupyter Notebooks, and it provides, it's almost like an IDE of sorts, or it's a different way to see these Jupyter Notebooks and execute these Jupyter Notebooks. So again, you can do this in Jupyter Lab, or you can do this in the browser itself, which is essentially what we're going to be doing later on. But again, this isn't the event that you don't necessarily want to install everything and you just want to take things for a spin, but again, without installing anything. The other thing that you could do is, let me see if I can go here. .NET Interactive. If you want to install this, if you don't want to go through the steps of installing Anaconda and doing all these things, but you still want to be able to try it out in a sort of in a way that's yeah, thanks. Yeah, it certainly yeah, the video thing was screwed up, but again, yeah, we'll just keep rolling without video. Um, so another way that you can do this, you'll notice, is if you remember, I said that what Binder does is it creates a Docker image with all the dependencies and all the things that you would need in order to run your Jupyter Notebooks and the .NET kernel inside of Jupyter Notebooks. Essentially, the Docker file that creates that binder is this one here. So what you could do is, if you wanted, you could take this Docker image. The one thing that you might have trouble with is this one here. What it's doing here is it's basically copying the samples that are in this repo over to this notebooks, because if you were building your own image and you weren't you didn't necessarily have access to these notebooks, you might run into issues there. But otherwise, you can essentially take pretty much this whole file and run and create your own image and run it in a Docker, and that way you don't have to install Anaconda. You don't have to basically put all these things on your computer, and you can just have a really quick and easy way of trying things out on your PC. So again, just another alternative. But we are going to be doing this inside of this particular computer. So it's as easy as saying Jupyter Notebook. And what Jupyter Notebook will do is it's going to start a server locally that's going to render the notebooks, the notebook UI in my browser. So if we were to visit this particular URL, which automatically opens up for me, you would see that in this case, we are inside of the Reactor Workshops project. Okay. Reactor Workshops directory. And there's that README. If we were to sort of open that up, we can see there it is. Reactor Workshops is directory. So it's exactly the same file. So in essence, it's kind of like a file browser that you get, but this is not what we're trying to do. We're trying to, first of all, let's do a folder. And what was the name of this one? It was called Data Science 1. Full day. Okay. So there's multiple subfolders. Can I rename this? Let's go level up. Rename. There we go. Full day. IMA dash instead of underscore person. So we'll go with dash here. And then we want to create a new folder. Is that what it was? Oh, it was Data Science 1 full day. So let's go back here. Let's rename full day. Data Science 1 name. And then we want to go ahead, add new full folder. And we want to call this one full day. Okay. So in this case, it's the intro to Python. Okay. I wonder if it's worth going over FSharp for folks who may not be as familiar with it. Sure, let's try it. Let's go through the whole workshop. It might be a little boring at first, but at least it allows us to get a little bit familiar and to see what we can and can't do with FSharp. Okay, so let's start with this one. So in order to create a new notebook, you would basically go to new. Actually, let me see if I can bump this up. It's a little small, hard to read. You would go to new, and as you can see, here's the different kernels. So there's C#, there's F#, there's F# again. So something that I'll note is .NET Interactive is relatively new, but the idea and the implementation of having F Sharp specifically running in Jupyter Notebooks, that piece is not actually. Again, the F Sharp community is just amazing in how they build these tools, and in general, the .NET community is really great. But there was a project called IF Sharp, which you can still use to this day. And it's an open source project. And what that did was it allowed you, much in the same way, to run F Sharp inside of Jupyter Notebooks. And this is still around. In fact, it's what the Microsoft Azure Notebooks run. So with Azure Notebooks, Azure Notebooks, it's this hosted service where you're essentially able to run your Jupyter Notebooks and create projects with Jupyter Notebooks in the cloud, and it's all available for free, right? And the kernel for F Sharp that Azure Notebooks provides is actually this IF Sharp kernel, right? So there's that. So if you were to think about Azure Notebooks, it's kind of like that, like Binder, right? So it's very similar to it. Let's see. Okay, so what we want to do now is we want to create an F Sharp notebook, and I said I want to put these side by side. So let's go here, let's go here, and I want to call this 1-F Sharp. The other thing that I'll kind of note, maybe you may have noticed it, is Jupyter Notebooks. The way that you're able to know that it's a Jupyter Notebooks is by the extension. It's IPyNB, right? So that's, and regardless of whether it's using Python, F Sharp, whatever kernel it's using, it's still going to be IPyNB. And okay, so now we have our thing here. So let's see. Assigning variables, okay. Let's spam equal 1. And then let's tax equals, this is not a comment because it's inside of quotes. Now if I were to then %s text. Okay. Well, what happened there? Print fn is not defined. Maybe you won't want to print. Oh, there we go. Print. It's print, not printin. And if we do that, there it is. So the way that you assign variables in F Sharp is you use let, right? So in this case, we define a variable called spam, and we assign it the value 1, and then we basically create another variable called text, and then we assigned it this value, and when we print it, we formatted it so that it prints out a string, and we pass in the value text, and that's what prints this piece out. One of the things that I'll note is that in F Sharp, variables are immutable. So with Jupyter Notebooks, that won't really be the case. So I'll show you. So if I do let spam is equal to 3, you're gonna see there's no errors there. But if I was doing this inside of a program, I might run into an issue, and the compiler might complain because I can't reassign things kind of like I would in Python, right? So that's both good and bad, right? Because one of the things that it allows you to do is it allows you to work with immutable data. So you know that your data, or at least the core, won't change. You can perform transformations to that data, but the original data won't change. And there's something good about that, because you can always, in case you made a mistake, your data hasn't been changed by the transformation. You can apply transformations to it, but the data hasn't necessarily changed. So you're able to basically go back and redo anything that you need done in case you may have messed up or something like that. One second. I think this should last me my computer levels are kind of low, but we'll keep going. I think it should last me for another 15 minutes or so. So if you want to do arithmetic, right, we kind of saw already, print fn hello world. All right, we can do that. Data, it's very much the same way. 2 plus 3. There you go. And you can see one of the benefits of Jupyter Notebooks, right, is you get that immediate feedback. So with Python and FSharp, you have the REPL, the read, evaluate, print loop. And the nice thing about that is you're able to get immediate feedback on the command line. The problem is it's not visual enough, right? And for these very simple cases where we're just doing arithmetic, you don't necessarily care too much about it. But in the case where you're working with data and you're looking at charts, you're looking at tables, then it actually becomes a little bit more important that you're able to visualize the results of different transformations. So there's that. I won't necessarily bore you with this because it works in very much the same. Oh, see. Okay, so here is types coming to the rescue. So in this case, I told it I want to multiply 3 by 3.5. In this case, in the Python, by the way, so maybe it might have been a bit confusing. On the left-hand side here, I have the Python notebook. On the right-hand side, I have the FSharp notebook. So in the Python side, this will work. Okay, you can multiply 3 by 3.5, and it will work. In this case, it doesn't work because this is an int and this is a float. So it's like, hey, there's one's an int, one's a float. Which one is it? So to work, there you go. So types to the rescue. Nice. Okay, 5. Whoa. 5, 2. It doesn't support the operator pow. Okay, so you can't do that. But can I do pow 5, 2? Pow and 5, 2. There we go. Okay, so here what we wanted to do is we want to do 5 to the power of 2. It seems like FSharp doesn't have, or this operator itself doesn't support. Let me actually see something. 5 dot 2 dot. Oh, okay. So in FSharp, if I were to do 5 2, this doesn't work. And the reason why it doesn't work is int doesn't support the power operator, or raising the power of. So the way that we could get it to work though is we use floats. And with floats, it likes that. So interesting. I learned something today. Okay. There's order operations. There's variables. That's pretty much the same thing. Read only. Round. Blank. Okay. So there's embedded Jupyter Notebooks. You can use the built-in variable underscore, which automatically takes the value of the last printed expression. For example, price times tax. Okay, let's try that out. Can we do that with FSharp? Tax equals 11.3 divided by 100. No. But there we go. And I was right the first time. Okay, so tax price equals 19.95. Price times tax. Okay. Oh, again, let. Okay, nice. So in this one, can I do that? Price plus. Okay, so this is nothing. see something real quick. So one of the things that you're able to use is the .NET FSI or FSharp Interactive. That's essentially the REPL for FSharp. So if we were to do .NET, this is actually built into the latest .NET Core SDK. So if you simply do .NET FSI, it automatically starts it for you. In this case, I'm using version 5.0 of FSharp. So if I do let x equals 1, val it. Okay, it. So if I were to, there we go. So you can use it, and where I got it from was right here. Right, you can see. If you can see here, that's essentially the result of the latest value that was printed out. So what I could do is, in this case, the tax was 225, price times tax, right? So this is the tax. And then when I do price plus it, you can see it's the 1995 plus the result of the latest evaluated expression. Okay? So there's that. You do not have to find variables one at a time. You can find multiple variables at once. So, okay. And we do that with FSharp. A, B, C, and I think I think this one might A, okay, B, C. There you go. So you can. So I hope some of the stuff that I'm doing now, it might be a little boring going over this. I'm actually learning some new stuff along the way. But what I do hope that this shows is, if you are, if you're considering Python, or if you're coming from a Python background, the syntax, it's fairly similar, other than this let thing here, and using printfn instead of print. For the most part, it looks the same. Instead of using the underscore, we use it. And that we have to make sure that our types align. It's pretty much the same thing. Okay. All right. So Python does not restrict comparing two operands at a time. For example, A is less than A. Whoops. A is less than B is less than C. It's true. Oh, okay. So when we're doing operations, notice again, we had a float, an int, and an int. To assign these, it doesn't matter, but now that we want to use it in comparison, it matters. So what if we did float, just for the sake of this expression? Okay. So this one doesn't let you do that. To have type bool, here has type float. Oh, whoops. I think, let's see. Expression, here's type float. Does this work? Huh. How can I get this to work? Let's see. Okay, that works. A is less than B? No. Oh, let A, B, C is equal to 1, 2, 3. And then here, let's see. Oh, and by the way, so I'm using like keyboard shortcuts. So in this case, if you were to type B, it creates a cell at the bottom. If you were to do DD, it deletes it. If you hit DA, it creates it above. but you can also do this here, right? You can insert cell above, cell below. To run it, I'm pressing Control Enter, but you can also use this run button up here, and that would essentially run your it would run the particular cell that you're looking at. Also, let's say that you had an entire notebook and you wanted to run the entire notebook. What you can do is you can either run cells. That's one cell. You can run all the cells. For example, let's say that we were here. What you can do is you can say run all below. So starting with this cell here, it will run that. So you can choose how you execute and how you run data in these notebooks, or how you execute these notebooks. Okay, so let's see. A is less than B is less than C. That didn't work. And it's not going to work because, let's see. So A is B and B is less than C. I guess that's a way that I could write this. B less than C. All right. I guess that works. So we can't necessarily represent it like this, right? So A is less than B is less than C, because the result of this is going to be a Boolean, and then when you compare a Boolean to a value, to an integer, then that wouldn't work. So you need to be very explicit, like A is less than B and B is less than C, and that way you kind of get the output that you want. Interesting. All right. So let's see. Or not. So, whoops. That's my alarm that I'm going to turn into a pumpkin. Okay, so let's see how much is left here. We got strings, we got string literals, concatenating strings. Okay, we're going to sort of pause here. Going to leave it off at strings. We're using operators. But yeah, let's take a pause here. I will be back on Wednesday to do another hour of this, and we can sort of pick up where we left off. So in the meantime, we have this saved here. Let's go ahead and let's go ahead and stop the kernel. So Control C will shut down our kernel. You could also shut it down by going here and I can't do that anymore. But essentially, there's an option here that allows you to stop the kernel. In this case, I did it from the command line. Again, it's your choice how you choose to go about it. Okay, and whoops, stream. Do I still have it here? I do. Oh, but here I only have the README open, so fine. Let's go through here. Git status, Git add. Actually, I don't want to commit git. Let's see, code. Let's open this in code. There's just something that I want to do here. So what these checkpoints do is they are exactly what it sounds like. So let's say that, so these notebooks, for the most part, they're auto-saving in the background, and they create these checkpoints for you. So you see these .ipynb checkpoints. Again, all they are is sort of like auto-save versions of your notebook in case you forget to save it. For the most part, they work really well, but for version control purposes, you may not really care, or I certainly don't. So let me go and see checkpoints, ipynb checkpoints. So let's see. Dot I pi and b checkpoints. Okay. Now what does that do? Does that suddenly? I had added it. Okay. That work? Oh, it did. Okay. So now we're gonna go ahead and check in. Started DS1 workshop full day. Okay. I'm pretty happy with that. Let's go ahead and check in our changes. Yes to origin master. One of the other really neat things that I'll show you, and you kind of saw that already with the reactors notebooks, is that, close this here. One of the things that you saw there was, so notice how here we're looking at this inside of, this is the Python version, the original one that we're working off of. GitHub by default has this way to render Jupyter Notebooks in this really nice format. All right, so something very similar to what you'd see if you were to be running your own sort of server and rendering these notebooks. If I go back to mine and I refresh it, you should see the same thing. So one FSharp by pi and b. Take a while. Yep. And notice how if you decide to save it with the output, you also get the output rendered here as well. So that's very neat. So yeah, so in this first one, this first stream, I kind of introduced you to sort of what my motives were behind this. What I wanted to do, again, I just wanted it to be a learning experience for everybody involved. And what we're going to continue doing over the next few days is we're going to be taking a look at these reactors workshops, which are typically written and designed using Python. And what I want to do is I want to use .NET and FSharp libraries and languages, again, particularly FSharp in this case, to try to replicate what's in here and see how far can we get with existing libraries and with the existing .NET functionality to be able to build these data science and machine learning workflows. So please feel free to follow me on Twitch so that you can stay up to date whenever I go live. So far, I have planned to do Mondays and Wednesdays at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And, you know, that can change. But for the time being, that's what we're doing. That's what I'm doing. So yeah, I hope that you learned a thing or two. I certainly did. I didn't know about the power operator. So that's something new that I learned. And yeah, I hope to see you back on Wednesday. Thanks a lot.